Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are just finishing up day one here at All Things Open here in Raleigh. We've been trying to hit on a bunch of different topics that we don't always cover on a day-to-day basis or week-to-week basis for the podcast. So today we're lucky, a couple of different things that we're going to cover in this one. Very lucky to have Heather Shapiro, who's from the Developer Evangelist, Technical Evangelist team at Microsoft. So good to have the folks from Microsoft back on. You are presenting on data visualization and trying to make it interesting in big data. Tell us about your talk.
Yeah, so my talk is an end to boring data using visualizations. So I'm focusing in Python. It's one of the easier languages that you can use for data science, similar to R, but has, I think, a lot more interactivity for graphs that you can do. So focus on my journey, I guess, as I was trying to find different libraries that you can use. And so my background was in R, so switching over to Python, it's faster, and is easier for me personally. So my journey of like which libraries I like, which libraries were really difficult. Yeah, and didn't like.
So we had some folks. We had Melissa from Fidelity who was giving us her journey. She is in the data science group for Fidelity, the big investment company. But she was saying, her world sort of started back before they called it data science. It was, it was in astronomy and science. Give us a little bit of your background and what's drawn you to this space.
Yeah, so I just graduated from Duke, so down the road, last year, so 2015, and I studied computer science and statistics. My focus was more so on the statistics side, trying to do analytics, and I've always kind of really liked numbers ever since I was little, so analyzing, just making sense of data. I guess I'm a nerd that way. Now, most people don't like to do the data munging, but that's actually one of my favorite things. So I started there, and now I'm focusing a lot in machine learning, data science at Microsoft.
Okay, cool. So give us the basics. Tell us about the developer team, the sort of developer evangelist team. What are you focused on? Is it entirely data science? Is it really about what Microsoft's doing in the cloud? Give us a sense of who you're talking to, what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I like to say we're geeks who speak. That's what a lot of people on our team will call us. So we're developers, but we don't have a specific product. So we go in, we'll create demos, workshops that we can then deliver to students, startups, developers in the community, just to teach them about technology in general, so it doesn't always have to be Microsoft focused. So Python is a good example, it's just open source. But there are a lot of resources that we have at Microsoft that are incorporating Python now. Sure. So you can run Python scripts on Azure Notebooks, you can run them in Azure Machine Learning. So my talk isn't necessarily a Microsoft pitch, it's just like the components that I use can be used with Microsoft products. Right.
No, it makes sense. And nowadays, kind of trying to define Microsoft is a little trickier because it's not just Windows. It's not proprietary software. You're here at All Things Open. It's open source software. It's community based stuff. Give me a sense. So you're just getting out of school, a year or so ago. How much was Microsoft a part of sort of your computing experience growing up over the last, say 10 years? Because it's changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess growing up before college, I always had a PC at home. So that was my background there. But then in college, I switched to a Mac. And a lot of people at work actually do use Mac. So there's not really any competition there. Like I have an Android phone. It's not really that big of a deal.
It's definitely a different Microsoft these days.
Exactly. So I came in mostly doing like a lot of Mac, iOS stuff. Because I guess in schools, when I was there wasn't that much Windows or Microsoft focus, which we're trying to change now, obviously, because we're open source, Windows 10, everything. So I started at a good time because it was a month before Windows 10 came out, and this whole new Microsoft. And so it was a very good time to start with the company because everyone's perceptions started changing. And even just in the year, so I go to a lot of hackathons. Last year, a lot of people were like, we don't necessarily want to know what you're doing. But now we have these computer vision APIs, bot frameworks. It's all open, and people are really willing to use them and excited about it.
Yeah. So for a while, if you told somebody did big data and they talked about Microsoft, it was Excel. And if they did visualization, it was PowerPoint. And I kind of don't mean that jokingly. Like a lot of people would say, like, look, most of our data analysis is done in those tools. Like, what's the modern? So you're talking about, taking data, not making it boring, visualizing it. Like, what's the modern Microsoft approach to that?
So I guess right now it's very open to, but we're working mostly with like Power BI for visualization. So there aren't that many tools right now with Microsoft for visualizations. So things like that, we are lacking a little, but hopefully in the future.
Right.
But things like Power BI is good for the consumer or customer that they can then put reports together that you can then bring in D3. You can then bring in all these outside components. So I think right now the focus is like, let's create a product and then bring in.
Okay.
I think Satya always says like co-opetition, which I thought was really interesting. So I actually, when I was introduced to Microsoft at Grace Hopper a few years ago, he spoke there and he talked a lot about co-opetition and how we shouldn't be competitive with other companies. We should be collaborating with them. Right. And that really spoke to me a lot of let's use what other people are making and make it better or make new products.
Yeah, and I mean, we were talking before we started recording, you were saying a lot of the times you're out talking to, say, university students and doing hackathons and using things like Azure Machine Learning, some of these, the Vision API, like where do those fit in? I mean, do people, like that's powerful concepts. It's, years and years of PhDs sort of put into a service. Like, do people grasp what's available to them today? I mean, are you just having to help them understand concepts, or are they, you unleash these things and they go wild with it?
I guess it depends on the group that we're talking to.
Sure.
So for students that have never looked into it, like statistics before, if you bring them to Azure Machine Learning, they're kind of overwhelmed. So Azure Machine Learning is a great tool that you can just use drag and drop, and you don't have to know any statistics. You don't really have to know how to code. Right. You just have to know the process, and you can try all these different algorithms. So in that sense, it's easy for them to pick it up because you don't really have to know anything.
Right. And do you walk them through sort of samples? Are there sample data sets, or are there games around it? Things like that?
Yeah, there's tons of sample data sets. I actually did a course last year for like middle school and high school students that was online, intro to data science and then intro to Azure Machine Learning. And the data set we used was from Kaggle. So that's a open data competition site. Right. So we had one for the Titanic. Okay. So if you can predict whether or not someone would survive or not. So that's always an interesting one because it's people recognize the movie, the songs, and at least it's somewhat relatable and it's not too controversial and different things.
Yeah. No, that's cool. That's very cool. So, so you're doing that. You're you're getting people excited about just data science in general. Obviously, where Microsoft wants to go with that. Like we said, you just graduated. I'll date myself. I've been doing this stuff for about 20 years, and I was sort of telling you, like, right now our industry is kind of at an inflection point. So all of the sort of industry rules have sort of changed. You don't have vendors that just sell one thing. You can buy from the cloud. There's open source. There's all these things that are different. You're coming into this brand new. Like, what's your? You open your eyes. Like, what does the tech industry look like to you right now?
Well, I think, especially for my role, it's very interesting to see younger people being brought in as evangelists. Traditionally, it's the older white male.
Sure.
And I think on one of my first days, that's what someone told me. They're like, you are not the traditional evangelist. Like, you will have to work hard to gain everyone's trust in the community because I don't have as much experience.
Right.
So to evangelize something when I don't necessarily have all the projects is hard. But that the perks of this job is that I can now go through and like look at the things that are interesting to me and then make demos, projects. Like I did one on Perez Hilton, doing sentiment analysis on his tweets. Right. So it's not necessarily something that other people would be interested in, but I could put my passions towards
and where maybe you lack in pure experience from a year's perspective, you've got you've got to connect this to new people that are trying to learn stuff as well. So there's a shared experience of being like, you may be better off because you're just 5 minutes smarter than somebody else, but you've gotten that in there, and that's. I mean, I'll say this: like looking through the set of people that are here for this conference, looking through the agenda, Microsoft has a number of people from your team that are all female, which is you guys should be very much commended for that.
It's crazy. Diversity, I didn't know that when I started, or like before I came in. I was like, oh my gosh, like a lot of our team are women. I don't know, maybe we're better speakers, who knows?
Yeah.
But it's just a very interesting dynamic, and it's great to see. So good to see that with like age, they're not discriminating, and gender, because you never know.
And that's got to make it easier for you. Just shared experience with people. You don't have to feel like intimidated or, when should I speak up or anything like that. And so let's flip that over and let's not make this a Microsoft thing, but you're new into the workplace.
Yes.
Everyone wants to talk about millennials and how do we, give me a sense. What do you see in the workplace that, just sort of makes sense to you, and what stuff do companies do? Granted, your sample size is small, but that you just go why in the world do you do that? What's wrong with you people? It's just slow and boring and whatever.
So I guess one thing that I've had a lot of challenge with is work-life balance.
Yeah.
As a new hire, so in college it was always I'm doing work, and then when I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah.
And now I'm traveling a lot, so it's hard to get that balance of when to say no, when to say yes.
Right.
Especially being new, you want to impress everyone, and I've always been I guess that overachiever,
right.
Trying to do as much as I can to get to that next level. So finding that balance has been challenging for me, just because you get praised for doing more work, right?
Right.
So
right. Yeah, where does the loop end?
Exactly. So if I didn't work a weekend and someone else did, then they're going to be commended for working that weekend. Right. So that's been the biggest challenge. And I think also being younger is also a challenge for that, because other people who are older, who might have kids, I've found that sometimes they're wait, you don't have children, don't you have more time? And I'm
that's right. Higher expectations because of,
exactly. They're well, you have tons of time now because you're young. And I'm well, I still have a life, or I want to have a life, still have family, friends that I want to see. So that's been really hard.
Yeah.
And in the second year that I'm going through, it's been easier. But those first few months, I was saying yes to everything,
right.
Just because
you feel like you have to. You're trying to make a career out of it. Obviously, you sort of high performance person. You went to Duke. You're at Microsoft. I mean, they recruited you for a reason. And so we get a lot of folks on the show who will have kids, and they're looking at the world and they're going, I'll take myself for example. First job was I ran a paper route. Well, newspapers don't exist anymore. I mean, for the most part, so there are literally jobs in industries that don't exist anymore. Data is a big part of kind of every industry these days, and whether it's people, I used the analogy this morning, hey, it's my fantasy football team. They're comfortable with data, but it's still complicated, right? Let's suppose you're talking to that middle school kid who might be one of the daughters of our listeners or something.
Yep.
Walk us through how you help them, not only kind of understand the basics of this, but kind of get them passionate about it, right? You're kind of doing part educator, part teacher, and you want to inspire them to go that thing I learned from Heather makes you want to go learn something else. Walk me through a little bit of that cycle.
Yeah, so that was a challenging part of teaching, just because I taught in East Harlem last year,
okay.
Underprivileged school, so they didn't necessarily have computers, internet, so that I had to come back and rechange everything to make it interesting for them. So that is one of the more difficult things, is you have to keep them constantly engaged, keep giving them motivation. So one thing that I've found that I don't necessarily like in schooling is that we teach people that you need to get 100. Okay. And one of my professors who I actually spoke to today, she has always viewed it that if you get an 80, you shouldn't be told that you got 20% wrong. You should be told you got 80% right of a new topic. And that's more encouraging. Even when you're grading tests, instead of doing minus, doing a plus. You got 5 points here.
Start from zero and move up. And,
exactly. So giving them that encouragement that they can actually do it is very important, especially with the middle schoolers. Some of them didn't necessarily know the math skills, so teaching them mean, median, mode, and just telling them oh, let's try it again, working with them and not telling them, why are you doing it that way? You don't know anything.
Right.
It was a learning experience, but it's totally necessary. Once I started doing that and started walking them through the problems and just being more open to letting them fail and not necessarily caring that they fail,
right.
It's a good learning process for them, and it was for me too.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think back in the day people would have said, well, that approach, you're just sort of giving kids the easy path, right? Oh, you get made 80, it's good enough, whatever. I think nowadays, and I don't know for sure, but you're going to go through a lot of different jobs.
Yep.
I remember, and this used to blow me away, but people used to say, well, my parents would have had 1 or 2 jobs in their life, but like one career. They would have spent their life in an industry.
40 years, yeah.
Yeah, whatever it was. And my generation, they said, like, you will have, I don't know, 30, 40 jobs and like 3 or 4 careers. And thinking, putting that in perspective. But I think in your generation, you guys are going to find that things move so fast in just a couple of years that you have to be good at learning. And part of learning is knowing how to fail, learning how to, not being afraid to take on something new. That little analogy you made makes a lot of sense, especially just given what people are going to walk into. You don't know how long an industry is going to last. You don't know how long a company is going to last. You may be interested in doing something else. And, and now that data makes so many more decisions, you have far less sort of gut feel and more of like, we can be pretty precise about what's going to happen. And when that happens, now you have like far less fluff. Things get more efficient and things
exactly.
happen faster.
Now numbers rule everything because you have the access to them.
Yeah.
And it's also teaching them that to admit if they need help.
Yeah.
Because that was one of my challenges in school was I was taking 4 comp sci math classes at a time, no other classes besides like quantitative, sorry. And I was like, I'm not that great at linear algebra. I'm going to need help. I need a tutor. And they teach you to be like embarrassed by asking for help. But for me, that was so helpful to be able to be like, okay, well, I don't want to fail my other classes. If I get help here, then I can do better in those. And then in the end, it's a win-win. Yeah,
and it's interesting because you highlight something that I sat in one of the sessions today. It was talking about open communities and so forth. And one of the things that jumped out at me was everything that they preach about open communities is almost the complete opposite of what you get in school, which is, you don't always want to ask for help. You don't want to fail. You don't want to think about failing. You don't want to turn things in sort of half done. And in the open communities, it's I can ask questions. I can go find things. I can use Stack Overflow. I can use Core.
I can get help.
I can get help, and it's okay. And there is a lot of sort of unwinding your brain for what school kind of programs for you. Sort of take what's learned, but maybe some of the behaviors you have to change a little bit. Interesting.
And I guess you also need in one sense, you do need that discipline of doing it yourself so that once you actually have to go into the community, go in the real world, if you have to do it, then you can. But also, I guess you learn that the things that you do need to know. So if you don't go through that learning process, you won't know what you're missing, I guess. Yeah,
you almost have to learn how to learn more than you have to learn the answer. Because Google's got an answer for something. You just got to know how to go find it and learn it and apply it.
Or that's a topic. So there's so many topics here that I'm like, I didn't even know that term existed. Now I know, and I can go look into it. But if I didn't have that discipline of like wanting to learn and always trying to learn a new topic, that would be over my head. What's
obviously you're giving a lot of talks, you're talking to different audiences and so forth. What are some of the most frequent questions you get? You finish your talk, someone comes up and like, where's people's heads these days around data, big data, analytics, visualization?
Well, the most frequent question is, what is a tech evangelist? Evangelist is just like a weird title. You're like,
it sounds like an interesting job. You just fly around and talk.
Exactly. Yeah. You're like, oh, what are you evangelizing? Like technology? Yeah. Most questions are mainly like, how can they contribute? What kind of projects can they find that they can work on, or demos? So most of my talks are like showing you how to do something. So here's the sample code. You can now go back and do it on your own. So walking them through that process and then making it super easy for them to pick it up and put their own code in or put their own data set in, and they just have to rewrite the names and something like that.
Yeah, cut, paste, and fix.
Exactly. So it makes it. Those are the main questions that I'll get. Is just how can they contribute? What are, I guess, the resources that everyone's really interested in learning? So that's always good.
Yeah.
And right now, like the huge push is, I guess, for like the computer vision and bots. That's been really interesting, especially to students, because if you're at a hackathon, it's something that is eye-popping that you could make.
Right.
So that's been really, there have been a lot of questions about that.
Okay. So have you reached a point yet where, and this might just be the audience that you talk to, like, are they connecting it to business type problems yet, or is this still a lot of learning, figure out the technology, do something interesting with it, and when they get into jobs and industry, they'll apply it to whatever their specific markets might be?
For students, it's mostly learning in general, so that's why it doesn't have to be Microsoft specific. It's let's teach you how to learn and to get you excited about learning, about technology in general. So especially for women, just getting them excited, knowing that there's so many options. So we do a lot with like Women Who Code, Girls Who Code, so that. And do workshops with them, teaching them that, like, okay, look, you can do this. You have 2 women developers like teaching you how to do it. So that's always a good motivation for them when they see women are actually doing it. So that's one thing. But I guess when it's more community members, if I'm at meetups, then it really depends on who's there.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last one, because I know you've got a schedule. We're busy. You talked about sort of making women comfortable, which is great. Getting them not afraid of math, not afraid of science. Do you find there are sort of women-centric communities? I mean, is that happening where it's like, look, this is a safe space. This is sort of a women's only, not women's only, but sort of women-driven thing, so that people reach a level of confidence before they jump in? Or how does that dynamic kind of work in the communities?
It seems that it's the other way. So it's find the passion in technology, and then let's find all the women who are doing it, as opposed to let's get a group of women together and then push them towards something. Right. So there are tons of those communities around. Like last week I was at Grace Hopper speaking there. So just seeing all the community like come together and what everyone is doing is so inspiring, just because you have people at all different levels. You have the students who are freshmen that are like, I don't know, doing mind-blowing things. And then you have the senior level people who've worked their way all the way up, and they've had probably had to face more adversity than we have.
Sure.
Just because that's how the industry has changed. So it's different per community, but for the most part, it's been after we come into the community, like, let's find that group and feel more comfortable. So there definitely are those. Yeah. And I float to them more, I guess, but at the same time, I definitely don't want to be highly regarded because I'm a woman, you know?
Yeah. You don't want to be pigeonholed, but you do want to. No, and I think it's going to be interesting, because I think we're going to see a generation of companies, your age will sort of be starting this, where we'll see female-led companies that are going to go become the next, I don't know, maybe not as big as Facebook, just because Facebook's in orbit, but I mean, that they couldn't become the next Facebook. They couldn't become the next doing whatever.
Exactly. These entrepreneurs, they could be doing anything.
Yeah, and they'll be led by women, right? So it won't just be people going like, oh, well, look at Sheryl Sandberg, or look at it'll be that company, not only did they do awesome stuff, but, oh, by the way, they're all driven by women. They've created this unique culture because of, just a different perspective on things. Maybe it'll be around design, maybe it'll be around whatever. No, that's going to be very, very interesting to watch, because I think these movements like Girls Who Code and all those things are going to begin to, we're going to see if kind of a, flowering, 1,000 buds that flower that's going to come out of all this and start to get girls excited. And I think it's cool that that's not your only thing, that you're driving that, you recognize that that's important.
It's hard to find that balance, though, because I want to be able to contribute back to that community, but at the same time, I don't want to be known just for being in that community.
You want to be a great engineer.
Exactly. It doesn't matter.
Have it hold up against anything.
Yep, exactly. I just want to be very technical, and anyone could ask me. It doesn't matter. Yeah. But then you still want to give back and encourage girls to start doing more science, quantitative fields, because it's not.
Yeah, I mean, data is going to play a role in everything, whether it's marketing or farming or
exactly, it's everywhere. Yeah, you need data for everything. So just learning how you can use it and having those classes when you're younger. Even so, for the class that we put out last year, there was a kindergarten class that did it.
Oh wow!
I don't know how far they got, but they still signed up for it. And that was awesome to see. Like, the teachers are pushing them. It's probably really over their head, but just showing them that they're interested. Yeah,
making numbers not scary.
Exactly. Yeah.
Early and no, that's very, very cool. So, Heather Shapiro, thank you so much for being on today.
Yeah, thank you.
Good luck in your talk tomorrow.
Thank you.
Hopefully we will follow up with you in the coming years and see where you're going and see where Microsoft's going. Thank you so much for being on today, folks. We're going to wrap it up here for day one at All Things Open, and we'll be back tomorrow with a number of other guests. But thanks for listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.